Ex-cons of Reddit. What's the most terrifying thing you saw inside of prison? I saw someone take a hot pot, fill it up with baby oil, add a pound of sugar, add some magic shave, bring it to a boil, then splash it in a person's face. It literally melted the guy's face off. This happened around 1999 and I still have the occasional nightmare about it. Just the way that some people talk about murder. Some of the people in there would be telling a story, casually drop the fact that they killed someone, then keep going on with the story like nothing happened. Dude in the cell next to mine tried to kill himself with a sharpened pencil. He just kept stabbing himself in the chest but couldn't get deep enough. He was hauled off by COs kicking and screaming, begging for death. He was going to be deported. A guy got stomped to death my first day in. The two guys fighting were rival gang members. The guards didn't do anything until the guy getting stomped stopped breathing. Then they came in and took them both away. One in a bag and one in cuffs. Okay, so unfortunately, my bunk was close to the corner where everybody came to fight or whatever. So this one guy claimed that he was a gang member, but it was discovered that he was a false flagger. So, the gang members put him in the corner and took turns beating and raping him. He was in the infirmary for about a week. When he came back, the gang got him all over again. He was transferred after that. I promise there aren't many things more terrifying than hearing a grown man scream while he's being raped. A dude got 2 full kettles of boiling water poured on his head. And a convicted murderer explaining how he killed, dismembered with an angle grinder, then disposed of the body. I did a 4-month stint in Kajang, Malaysia. This Nigerian dude used to pilfer from other cells. This Malay gang found him and dipped his hand in boiling oil, basically deep fried it while it was still attached to him. That scream, it still curdles my blood. Poor guy was reduced to an unconscious pool of blood, sweat, tears, vomit, shit and piss. He lost more than his hand on that day. I was never in prison, but in jail a bit for drug charges. I was in my 30s, but my bunkie was a really nice 19-year kid in there for selling drugs. He seemed a bit over his head, but introduced me to the jits. I didn't know anyone, and we'd play cards and shit. He had a real high bond, and one day they said to get his shit he got bail. He didn't know who, but I was so happy for him. The next morning the county told me he was shot and killed that night. Being very respectful, everyone liked the guy. It was confirmed on the evening news. Really fucked me up, and I can guess who got him bailed. I was in a South American prison. There was a lot of drug addicts. They usually sold their food in order to buy more drugs, so they were always hungry. One day I was eating my lunch. Rice, a leg of chicken and some beans. When I finished my meal there were some chicken bones left in my plate, and a drug addict approached me to ask if I could gift him the chicken bones. So I lent him my bones and he started eating them. It was heartbreaking. My brother said a guy across from him had a new cellmate who had gastrointestinal problems and wouldn't stop farting these rancid horrible farts after the guy told him repeatedly to stop. Not like he could help it, so the guy beat the farter to death in their cell with his bare hands. My brother said he had never seen so much blood from one person before. Inmates being denied medical treatment until they are dead. I saw it twice. Both were diabetics, both elderly, neither had family support, and both had conditions exacerbated by the inhumane housing situation. In South Texas heat they lock up 56 men per dorm in poorly ventilated metal buildings. On lockdown they require you to stay in your bunk on a plastic mattress for weeks, only allowed a 5-minute shower every 3rd day. I was 40 and in decent shape and I thought I might die there. In the afternoons the wall next to me was so hot I couldn't leave my hand on it. Shame on TDCJ and all of the employees. They put people in a terrible situation and we allow it to continue. If they treated dogs like that there would be pitchforks. End of rant. CO here. Had a guy stick a full-size number 2 pencil in his leg, the long way, inserted into his thigh, and shoved it under the skin until you couldn't see it anymore. Took him to the hospital to have it removed. Days later, he did the same thing, in the same hole with a rubberized pencil. Rinse and repeat, hospital removes the pencil again. Couple days later, while on active suicide watch, he managed to jam part of a styrofoam cup, playing cards, and caulking from a cell window into his leg pocket. Took him to the OR. Doctors pulled out another inch of wood pencil, pencil lead, and fragments of God knows what out of there. I don't even think he knew what all was in there. Edit. Obviously major mental health concerns here. Hope he's doing okay now. Father has assault charges. Was in UV my bad, forgot the word for kid, prison for 5 years. 1982-1987. He was friends with someone he didn't know was a rapist. He was forced to beat him up or he would be killed for sympathizing with a rapist. I was held without bail in county jail for 2 weeks. We get to watch TV during rec. We were watching the news one day, and this guy was arrested for killing a judge's brother by stabbing. He was a mean-looking skinhead with neck and face tats. Next day, he's now in my cell block looking extremely on edge. Turns out, the guy he killed sexually assaulted a female member of his family. Although set to get a prison sentence, he killed for his family's honor. Relayed by a friend, but he said the craziest thing about prison is how you inevitably meet someone who is more psychotic, sociopathic than the next guy. You think you've met some bad dudes on the streets, but there's always a bigger fish. Some forensic photos the guy in the cell next to me showed me of his victims, corpses. He killed them after he tortured them, in gang-related abductions. He removed a tattoo with an electric sander, and knives in both eye sockets, still in. They were part of his trial evidence. Not a crazy story, but was in for a few days and didn't realize they put you in cells based on the color of your skin. I'm a white dude with a Hispanic last name and they put me in a cell with a straight Nazi who told me if I went to actual prison, I was only in for a weekend, that I would be a misfit because I wasn't one thing or the other. He openly called the black dudes next to our cell horrible things. I'm not a con, but my dad told me when he was upstream, guards informed him that they had a high-case child rapist coming in. When the guy got there, he ended up being this old white man walking with a cane. He didn't last very long on the courtyard. They killed him on the prison yard. After reading these stories, I hope that I never have to go to a prison ever. Obligatory, not a con, but my brother did work for a hospital near a prison. One day while he was there, inmate is admitted for an infection around a stoma, where his colostomy bag was. Long story short, he had been letting dudes use his stoma for sexual relief in exchange for commissary and had not only infected it but also had chlamydia in his stomach cavity. Brixton, a wing. Coming back from canteen, this scary-looking wild-eyed dude steps across and tells me to hand over my burn, tobacco. I laugh and say no and walk by, waiting for him to do something. Nothing happened. Few minutes later, same guy opened some poor lad's stomach with one slash and he was lying there trying to hold his intestines in. I saw the fear and panic on his face. The scary guy just casually walked away. No idea what happened to either of them. Alarms went off. Everyone back to their cells and locked up again. Boiling hot peanut butter dumped on a sleeping child molester's face. The screaming and thrashing was pretty intense. The idea is that you can't wipe it off or something to mitigate the damage caused, it's going to burn deeply. And in my opinion, that was worse than watching a guy on the bench press take a 35K plate smashed to the skull repeatedly. He was dead pretty quickly. The peanut butter burn is a permanent disfigurement that will have months of pain and suffering. In a similar thread, I remember a response about hearing inmates grind their shivs all night before a riot, knowing you'd be fighting for your life soon. When an inmate ate another inmate's dick. The most terrifying thing I saw was my own transformation. Went in on a lame charge being a productive young person going to school to be a doctor. Left running the biggest sports book in the prison and helping move drugs in and around the prison. I learned how to package and sell drugs, which till this day I've never done any of. Also inadvertently got a lot of dudes beat up for not paying their debts. It wasn't what I saw, it was the sound and smell of my cellmate constantly farting. Keep in mind while reading these, that this behavior is explicitly allowed in these prisons by the people who run these prisons. I don't know if this counts, but my dad was in prison with Richard Speck, who is, if you don't know, an American mass murderer who brutally murdered and raped 8 nurses. My dad told me during his time in prison, Speck bragged about what he did all the time, and said prison was a wonderful vacation for him and he would do it all again if he had the chance. He would even go as far as saying how much he loved to kill those women. So sickening. Speck also made porn in prison, which I'm sure is on the internet somewhere. Hey, so if I were to end up in prison, and I basically said, I'm just here to do my time, I'll comply to whatever rules, guidelines, etc. What are the odds I get left alone? Pretty tame compared to what I've been reading, but I was in a juvenile correctional center, not UV, think long-term sentences for juveniles, where a buddy of mine was on a unit that was short-staffed, so he had to be on the sex offender unit. While he was there, he told me that the pedophiles would joke on each other that, your victim was 7 years old. Oh yeah, your victim was 4 years old. Yeah, well, you still masturbate to your victim. At least I didn't rape my brother. Needless to say, he was horrified. Edit. Horrified, not mortified. When I was in primary school P7, our prostitute got murdered across from the school. Tracy Wild. It ended up a cold case 20-odd years later. I share a cell with some Asian dude, Chinese to be exact. Dude had fast food restaurants, kids, nice house, the lot. He had a fight with a friend and got DNA took, and turns out he murdered said hooker. Small world when I think about the chances of that happening. Seen people who injected heroin and done it wrong and now have big holes in their legs. Seen slashing people jumping of balconies. How little people cared about each other. Like, the guards. I'm not an ex-con, I was in jail. But the guards would openly let the gangs beat the shit out of people for reasons. They'd also beat the shit out of you for no reason, just they didn't like your attitude. Humanity is gone the moment you enter jail. I've had ex-cons as clients. One saw his friend get stabbed, a lot, to death, and couldn't jump in to help him or he'd get stabbed too. Same guy was in charge of removing gang patches from other inmates. Patches, in this case, meant tattoos. You don't see many elderly gangsters for a reason. Not my story, but rather a guy the first know who was a company. Said an inmate decided it would be funny to shit in his cell and then spread it all over himself and the cell so the guards would have to clean him and the cell up. Imagine his surprise when they just didn't. Also didn't let him out for like a week, so he just sat in there, covered in shit, surrounded by everything covered in shit. Every single other inmate within sniffing distance absolutely livid because the entire place reeks of shit. The Dementors. Wolf spider stood on its hind legs like it was saying, "And what bitch, I left the room." I almost fell over when I saw how many uploads I have on this talk about warm a little girl's heart lol. Obviously the many of you have the same arachnophobia that I do, and sometimes what have spiders that big and it stands up at you, you can't step on it. So to all of you, thank you for your upvotes, have a great day. An ex-con friend told me that child abusers purposely get light sentences in the US because when they go to prison it forces the other inmates to kill them before they get out, e.g. judges do this on purpose knowing it will get them killed as soon as they go inside. Said he seen quite a few come in and a few weeks later they'd be dead, stabbed to death in showers or on the stairways. Guards only stand at the top and bottom while the prisoners walk down, never among them, cause that's where you'll get killed. A girl hanged herself because she didn't want to be released after serving her time. And a girl was beaten by officers and they killed her. And the reason people were there just blew my mind. An older man, who was in the cell next to mine, was on oxygen. They would give him food but he never ate it. He constantly complained, so that didn't help. He would be on the ground with food everywhere and the guard would make the inmates pick him up. This guy died a week later because of lack of vitamin K. Basically they starved him to death. That's what lack of vitamin K means. His health prevented him from eating his meals. I saw one guy get his face smashed in with a bocce ball as retaliation for being called out in front of the yard for an unpaid chocolate bar debt. And another guy got a razor blade slashed to the face, presumably over a beef carried over from the street. I recently had a moon pie for the first time in years and it reminded me of the night I heard a man get killed by his cellmate. Dude must have been out his mind cause all you heard was the wet slap of continuous stabs. Thankfully that time is long behind me. These women were arguing, one was sitting on the ground and the other was towering over her. The girl on the ground spit an ice cube in the girl's face. I've never seen someone flung so far that her weave ripped out upon takeoff. Massive open wound flesh gashes down to the bone made by herself on her forearms and top of the legs that she used to hide things in, like paint brushes, coffee rations, pens, etc. I could literally see her bones. Not prison but jail. I watched 4 guys jump one dude, beat and kick him so badly that his whole head was black and blue. He came into the bathroom 3 times in the span of 15-20 minutes asking the exact same questions. Still stays with me to this day. Quite traumatizing. Edit. It was more of a dark purple and blue. I've never seen anything like it, including the top of his head. How long does it take to get used to taking a dump in a small room with another random person? I've worked medical in jails and that is the worst part from what I could see. Well, and the food. I need to be alone. A lot. And man, COs are total uneducated dicks in most jails. In one county they and the majors in charge actually cared and tried to be good to the inmates that weren't assholes. But most places they are dicks that even mess with the mentally ill folks for fun. Watching a dude get maxed out for farting while we were eating. Myself in the mirror the first day waking up in my cell. I don't have any absolutely horrid stories. I didn't do any state time. But just the general disregard for the safety of the inmates. Especially during COVID where we're 23 and 1, on a good day, but sometimes stuck in the cell 4 days straight. Fed in the cell, no showers in that time, etc. There would be very obvious altercations in some of the cells. I remember seeing Cert drag 2 guys outside of a cell, probably an hour after they got in the fight. One dude was unconscious, the other was all bloodied. Rumor was it the unconscious kid died and the other dude was charged for murder. Neither of them ever made it back to the pod. I just can't help but feel that if with any sort of decent regard for human life the kid could have been saved. I'm not a con, but I did spend a couple days in jail. Basically you get stripped naked while a jailer watches you, checking for weapons, and put on a garb. They are not nice. If you walk where you shouldn't be, you get approached by a guard holding a baton and told to go back. Eventually, you get assigned to a cell, usually with a roommate. The guy I was with was a college dude who got pinched for DUI, so he was cool. Basically, everyone in the cell block was just watching TV and talking shit. There was no aggression among the other prisoners, and we were basically all just talking crap together about why we were in there. Lots of drug talk, etc., but everyone was super chill. I saw a guy tweaking hard on some kind of drug and try and cut off his penis. He kept crying as he was trying to saw it off. We were all horrified. The guards made us clean up his blood. Was pretty wild. 10 out of 10 would visit again.